Hey, I'm Peter Franson from christiangeekcentral.com and Spirit Blade Productions. Welcome to Essential Issues Weekly, where I talk about DC Comics recently released on the Ultra tier of the DC Universe Infinite subscription service 1 month after their original print publishing date. In each installment, I pick an assortment of comics to talk about as a DC fan and also explore what, if anything, they have to say about the essential issues of real life. Now, warning, full spoilers for everything that I talk about, so be aware. This is your first and only warning that many spoilers lie ahead, specifically for comics published January 24th, 2023. From that group, I have chosen Lazarus Planet, We Once Were Gods, number 1, Action Comics number 1051, Action Comics 1051, and Justice League of America number 2. All right, starting with Lazarus Planet, We Once Were Gods. I think I'm getting a sense for these one-shots that are for Lazarus Planet, and if you are new to my to this weekly series, I've been following Lazarus Planet specifically and starting this weekly series at this time specifically in anticipation of the Dawn of DC event, which is going to be starting, well, I think some issues do have that branding already that are coming out, but Lazarus Planet is said to be kind of the precursor, the setup in some ways. And these one-shots that have to do with Lazarus Planet, I think what they're doing, if I'm not mistaken, is with this anthology format, they are telling a series of short stories that each introduce some character, some new character, maybe in some cases some characters that have been pre-existing but are now kind of being brought to the forefront a little bit more. They are bringing these characters into the spotlight in order to prepare us to focus on them more fully in the Dawn of DC event. And I say that because there's a solicitation at the end of these issues that shows little images of some of the characters that are going to be focused on, and I think I'm seeing them show up in these little one-shots here. So we've got stuff related to Aquaman and to the Shazam family and to Wonder Woman. Honestly, I don't have much to say about this this comic because I don't really like the format. I think it's the anthology format that, I don't know, you guys can give me your take on this, but it seems to me that the anthology format, at least the way they seem to be leveraging it, is meant to work best for people that are still buying their comics individually. Because I think the selling point is, here, for just this one amount of money, for the amount of money of a regular comic book, then you're getting these multiple stories in one shot, and they're gonna kind of tease you and give you a taste of what's coming later. And so in hopes of seeing this cover and seeing the Shazam family and be like, oh, I'm into Shazam or whatever, you read, and it's not all about the Shazam family, but you're getting setups for what's going to be next relevant to them, but also what's going to be next relevant to the Wonder Woman world and the world of Aquaman and stuff like that, and kind of priming you to really be on board for all that's coming with Dawn of DC. But with the subscription service, I mean, I don't want these little snapshot, tiny, condensed stories that are just kind of throwing a bunch of quick exposition at me faster, more so than I think they would need to in a story that had its own issue. So it's just resulting in a style of storytelling that I'm like, just take your time with each of these. Just start the story with the Shazam comic. But I think what they would probably rightly fear is that, well, maybe someone's not into Shazam, but we want to, if they came to this anthology book to learn what's going on with Aquaman coming up, then they get this little taste of Shazam. Maybe we can get their interest that way. It's the same principle that leads them to do crossover stories where the Flash teams up with Green Lantern and you cross back and forth between their books to get the full story, But I feel like once you're on the full subscription model, which the comic book industry I don't think has made the transition to yet. I don't know what their numbers are. It'd be interesting to find out how close we are to it fully transitioning to what Netflix has become, where it's people just pay for access. If you're just paying for access like I am at this point, then it's not a financial risk to me to try out the first few pages of as many books as I want. So I think that this device that they're using, I just wonder, I mean, it makes sense that they would still be doing it now. I think a number of comic book fans probably are still, maybe most of them, I don't know, are still getting their comics print and on stands. But I just can't help but wonder if, like, say, 5 to 10 years from now, this approach is going to be irrelevant, and it's not going to be what best serves them. But anyway, so yeah, I don't really have much to say about Lazarus Planet, We Once Were Gods. I think that, you know, if anything, it just says, okay, keep your eye on what's happening with Wonder Woman, the world of Wonder Woman, with Martian Manhunter, maybe. And the character they introduced in Martian Manhunter, like, came into play and then died at the end of the story. And I'm like, okay, well, he got turned into a crystal or something. So maybe that crystal's going to come back to life and he'll not be dead after all. I don't know. I just kind of want to see these stories play out with the breathing room that I think would result in a style of storytelling that I'm going to enjoy more. All right, moving on. Action Comics 1051. Speaking of anthologies, I'm wondering if this is going to become an anthology book. I'm not really happy if that's going to be the case, but if you look at the cover, you've got everyone and their son, kind of literally, with a Superman-style S emblazoned on their chest, apparently featured in this book. And it's interesting to see kind of what they're teasing. We've got some kind of a revival of Metallo. Looks like he's kind of getting a makeover from Lex Luthor, it looks like. So we'll see. That's happened a few different times. But then we cut to this scene where the whole Superman family, both biological and otherwise, are gathered in the Kent's apartment in Metropolis. And there's so many characters here, and I'm just not ready to invest in all of them at once. If this is going to be a book where it's kind of treated as a team book, then I need to know, like, I think the strength of a team book, like, say, Justice League or Justice Society, is that you bring together these characters that you've already had exposure to in their solo books. I mean, that's how Justice Society started back in the day. It was the first team book in superhero publishing. The strength of it was bringing together these heroes that already were strong enough on their own to, like, have their own books and their own adventures. And that's just not the case here. But we're still getting this trade-off of having, you know, more characters but less focus on each of them individually. I suppose they can do arcs where they focus in on, you know, one or two characters, and, you know, that could potentially work for me. But I don't have a pre-existing interest in these characters apart from their relationship to Superman and showing up in his stories. None of them really stand on their own as someone that, like, I really am on board to read their story. In part because they all have very similar powers and similar origins. I've never liked the whole whatever, Superwoman, Supergirl, Super Dog, Super Cat, Superboy. You know, I mean, that was a thing they did, I think, back in the 50s, and I've never liked it. They've tried to kind of make it cool in various ways, and sometimes they succeed to different degrees to really pull me into who the character is. But it's the same thing with Batman, Batgirl, Batwoman, Batdog, all that kind of stuff. It's just like, come on, just let come up with new ideas for these other people. They can still have an association with Superman, with Batman, but give them, I don't know, something a little different going on. Anyway, I'll just voice my complaint again that they grew up John Kent and made him into, like, a, well, really, I think he's old enough to be called Superman. I think he's in his 20s. Is he a legal adult at least? But you look at this splash page with all these characters, and it's not immediately apparent to me which one of them is John and which one of them is Connor. Connor Kent, the returning Superboy from pre-Flashpoint continuity. He's back here. They've got the Chinese Superman here as well. I don't even know how he got connected to Superman. I've just not been that connected, I guess, to his story or Superman's when he was talking to Chinese Superman. But anyway, and then you've got these two completely brand new characters, this boy and this girl, that are said to be, let's see, who are they? Oh yeah, they're survivors, the youngest of the War-World Phalosians, and two of the bravest, most remarkable people I've ever met, says Clark. Okay, I didn't read that story, and you're saying these guys are from War-World, so they're not even Kryptonians, or are they? I don't know what in the world is going on here. It's just too much. It's too many unknown quantities for me to really be invested in this. It does look like they're maybe going to do something kind of interesting with John Kent, because with these two young kids coming along, he's, you know, and Lois and Clark being said to be adopting them. you sense a sadness in him, like maybe he's kind of being ousted or set aside, or like they are in this role in the family that he was once in that was lost, you know. And actually, I'm mourning that right along with John Kent. I wish they wouldn't have grown him up. Maybe they had these kids in here because they wanted to do a family thing, and they realized, oh, the chance we had to do that is gone now because John Kent got aged up. If we want a kid in this ensemble book, we have to bring some brand new ones in. I still think it's such an unnecessary shame that they grew him up, and I suspect it's just because of really our over-focus, our over-interest in sex. You want to age a character up so that you can explore tensions of dating, you know, tensions of romance and relationships. And sure enough, one of the key characteristics they're focusing in on with John Kent is that he's, I think, bisexual. I don't think they describe him as gay. I think he's bisexual. But I'm just like, can you just let him be a kid? I mean, clearly they see here that there would be some interest in readers seeing the Kents parenting younger children. So it's such a shame that was a missed opportunity. I'm still hoping that at some point there will be a story that brings John Kent back to his to his younger age. I think that they could pull that off. Let me come back to those thoughts in a second here. While we're still on the topic of just an over-interest, over-focus on sexualization, there's this moment here where John Kent is looking to get out a board game to play with the two young kids. He opens up a closet, and we see a red cape hanging with the Superman symbol and what looks like a very large leather collar or a leather belt of some kind, and there are chains hanging off of the Superman symbol. And John Kent is shocked for a second. He goes, "Whoa, Mom, why did Dad keep his?" And maybe that's a costume from some adventure that he had or whatever. So I don't really know what that's about. In fact, just superhero costume designs being what they are, I wouldn't have thought really anything of it until suddenly Lois runs over, slams the door, and says, "Hey, were you looking for something, sweetie?" And he's like, board games? And she says, "We keep those in the hall closet now." And he's like saying, "Oh man," you know, he's like muttering to himself, "Oh my gosh, what did I just see?" And they show him blushing, and then she, smiling and standing in front of the closed door now behind her, says, "Remember when you went through your whole thing about personal space? I do, you know." And so what they're suggesting here is that Lois is sexually into seeing Clark in this getup with the Superman symbol, but with chains hanging off of it and some kind of a, I don't know, a leather belt or collar. I don't know what's going on, but I'm just like, we don't need that. We don't need that. I mean, I think certainly from a Christian perspective, which is going to tend to overlap with a lot of traditional perspectives, I'm just like, I don't want to, first of all, I don't think it's necessary to explore Lois and Clark's sexual relationship at all. And I think furthermore, with Superman having so long stood for conservative morals, not necessarily political conservatism. I think in the 50s, certainly he was appropriated in some ways, and even maybe prior to that as kind of like a conservative symbol. But I mean, he's long since not been that. But I think that, you know, he stands for decency and propriety in the sense of, you know, he's not going to, he's not a sexualized character. And so, you know, if they want to hint and remind us now and then that he and Lois are sexually active, they're a couple that loves each other, and that's expressed physically, you can do that through just very subtle flirting now and then that you would see very commonly, sometimes even in public, between even, you know, conservative husbands and wives. You know, we don't need this to know that they are sexually active and have some kind of a healthy sexual relationship. Although, honestly, when it comes to masochism and stuff like that, I strongly suspect, I haven't done the research on it, but I strongly suspect that's an indication of things not going in a healthy direction sexually. If you need to kind of kink things up and make them weird and stuff, then it's becoming more about these surface level things than really the emotional element of love that is really meant to be at the heart the sex act between a husband and wife. So anyway, I don't feel like I need to say more on that, but I've spent way more time talking about it than it deserves given the amount of space and time that it's given in the comic. I think it was probably just a throwaway joke in the minds of the writers, but to me it's just one more thing that I would point to and say, yeah, here's another example of just how we are this overly sexualized culture, and we see that really coming out in our entertainment, and I just don't think it leads to good things. I think sex is a wonderful thing, but it has an appropriate place and time. I actually think it's so wonderful and so valuable that it should be addressed, and it should be held within only certain boundaries, you know. So anyway, I don't need to talk more on that. Let's skip ahead. So we got another story that is, let's see, is that the, yes, it's the next one. It says it's a flashback story. It says several years ago, and we see Clark and Lois taking their son John back to the farm that he was raised on, or a farm very much like it. I can't remember what the story is. The point is, this is a story. It's called Home Again Part 1. So this is going to be a continuing story written by Dan Jurgens in Action Comics. And I'm like, what's going on, DC? Why feel the need to go back and tell a story about young John Kent if you felt like it was the best move to age him up because that was going to be better? And I think it's because, well, I don't know, but I just wonder if there's some disagreement behind the scenes at DC about the decision to age him up. I believe that was done by Brian Michael Bendis, and maybe, you know, him coming on from Marvel and being such a superstar creator, they just gave in more than they would to another writer when Bendis, I assume Bendis, was behind the desire to age him up so that he could do A, B, and C with him, you know. But this clearly indicates to me that there are people at DC that recognize there was more we could have done. There are more stories still that can be told that are worth telling with a young John Kent. And so seeing this, very interesting to me, and I'm hopeful that is the case, that there is a realization behind closed doors at DC that, boy, there's stuff to do here with young John Kent, and I hope that their desire for that only grows to the point that they will de-age him, or we'll find out that the older John Kent is actually a clone or some weird replace. There's all kinds of weird things you could come up with that would be able to de-age him at this point, and restore the young John Kent. And I really hope they do that at some point, because there's so many great stories that can be told about the dynamics of parents and younger children that we just don't see happening anywhere, maybe outside of Damian Wayne and Bruce Wayne, but I mean, that's obviously a very different kind of situation and characters that are not going to remotely reflect a healthy home. But you have the opportunity to do that with Lois and Clark, all the more so with Jonathan and Martha Kent being revived now, and they could be grandparents in a young child's life. I mean, there's so many stories that could be told there. So I hope that they will kind of come to their senses, as it were, as far as I'm concerned, and de-age John Kent before too crazy long. Next, we got the story between Power Girl and, I can't remember her name, but the psychic from Teen Titans, and I could not be much less interested in this. You know, another shot here showing Power Girl changing in a way that I'm like, why are you even showing us this? It's just, I think it's like in some ways a totally unconscious sexualization going on in comic books now. But anyway, the thing I think that turns me off from this really is that they very quickly get Power Girl and the Teen Titans psychic, whose name escapes me at the moment, into the status quo of, we are the counselors for the superhero community. Because one of them has like a PhD in counseling. Power Girl's discovering these mind-reading abilities. They figure together we can pool our abilities and really do a lot of good. So they bring superheroes in, fully wearing their costumes. Dick Grayson, Nightwing, comes in with Gar Logan, Changeling or Beast Boy, and he's stuck in the form of like a young calf and is not changing for some reason. And so Power Girl goes for a trip into his subconscious, guided by the psychic. And I'm just like, it feels like way too quickly forced into being. I'm interested in the potential of this kind of premise. I don't know that I'm very interested in Psychic Girl, whose name I can't remember. Power Girl, I don't know. If you just write her in an interesting way, I guess. But I mean, the premise of dealing with mental health issues, and I love that faux psychological realism when it's introduced into comics. But this doesn't strike me. It's so forced. It happens so quickly. And the fix seems, frankly, very comic booky. She's having battles with constructs created in his mind. So it's just get in there and rock 'em, sock 'em, do some superhero stuff, and that'll, make things better for him psychologically in the real world. So I think the way they're dealing with his, what is probably post-traumatic stress from being shot in the face by Deathstroke, it's a little too light and I don't know, trivial for me. So I'm not really a fan of where that's going. So that's all for Action Comics 1051. Finally, Justice Society of America #2. I did, unlike some of these other books, I did go back and read issue #1 to get a running start at this. I'm a big fan of the Justice Society, and Jeff Johns writing it like, hello, okay, this is totally going to be my cup of tea. And Huntress is the main character. They are kind of recreating who she is and where she's from, presenting her as the actual child of the current main continuity, Bruce Wayne and Selina Kyle, but she is jumping through time from the future. It looks like maybe she'll be kind of stranded in the past permanently. I don't know how she'll be able to stay a part of the present-day Justice Society otherwise. But she is on a mission to save her team, which was murdered in the future, and she was told that if she could find Dr. Fate, presumably in the past, that she could get help in saving them. And so she starts this time-jumping journey, which first takes her back to the original Justice Society in the 1940s, where she's having to kind of introduce herself. So, I don't know how many adventures they're going to have, because she's continually kind of... well, it's not just her that's doing time jumping. Then Dr. Fate starts traveling through his own consciousness in various time periods. And so it's unclear what's going on here. But what I suspect is that they're using Huntress as kind of a centerpiece to visit different periods of the Justice Society's history, to give new readers a crash course on the Justice Society, who they are, who they've been, before kind of settling into the time period that is going to be the actual focus. Right now, they're jumping to 26 years from now and dealing with the older Catwoman and older Bruce Wayne and Huntress and stuff like that. And they're jumping to the past, to the 40s, and it looks like basically at the end of this issue, that next issue, we're finally going to be zeroing in on the present day. That's where the story leaves Huntress. And yeah, I don't have much to say at this point, except that I appreciate the way this story is being told. I think that Jeff Johns, along with Gail Simone, are just among the very few number of writers that I'm probably going to enjoy almost anything that they write. More so with Gail Simone. Jeff Johns has made a few missteps for me here and there, but this reminds me a bit of how the Justice Society series started out in the mid-2000s, when Stargirl was kind of the central character that the audience was meant to kind of connect with and relate to as we were expanding out and seeing more of the Justice Society. I feel like she was a little bit of the anchor for the audience, and that seems to be the role that Huntress is playing, where us through her eyes, as she's traveling through time and feeling like totally out of whack and like, what the crap is going on? She is the fish out of water for us to get to know the Justice Society in its different time periods. And I'm on board for that, because it allows us to at least invest in one character and their story and what's motivating and driving them as we're being introduced to all these other characters and situations and history and stuff. So yeah, no surprise to me, but of these three comics, I'm easily most on board with Justice Society and what Jeff Johns is doing so far there. But yeah, I think that's all that I have to say about comic books for now. I would love, as always, to get your thoughts and reactions in the comments below. Please remember to check out christiangeekcentral.com for our podcast and all kinds of other content as we continue to geek out and seek the truth.
I'm not interested.